Hello, this is Robert Brown with the Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative. Welcome you to this Digitalachia podcast. Digitalachia was developed by KVEC to inspire creativity and enable educators to network in real time and share professional learning experiences that ensures equity, access, and opportunity for all in our remote rural areas, regardless of their zip code. All of our learners are individuals and must be provided equitable opportunities for learning experiences that enable them to succeed both academically and socially. Through KVEC's learning platform on theholler.org, a collection of free resources and online professional development tools are available to aid in virtual learning and teaching in non-traditional ways. Some of the resources located on this site for educators and parents provide instruction for students who are not in the non-traditional way include a design lab with a wide array of digital learning experiences, including those for special needs populations, video production filming tips, and free screencasting resources to help teachers create and upload online lessons using Google Forms and Acrobat, and access to multiple micro credentials for educators and video recordings of KVEC's past micro credential summits. And speaking of micro credentials, that's our topic for today. And we've had conversations with micro credentials in the past, looked at the state level. But today we're going to be focusing on micro credentials and how districts are using these to transform their professional learning systems within their schools and districts. I want to welcome back Sue Beers of MISIC, which is Members Impacting Instruction and Improving Curriculum, located in Iowa, and KVEC's very own Jennifer Carroll, our professional learning lead, who is working with and developing multiple micro credentials and helping advance professional learning systems in the district. So welcome this morning, and I'm glad to see both of you today. First of all, before we get started, Sue, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization.
Okay. MISIC is a nonprofit member-based organization. We have no federal funding, no state funding. It's simply about 70 school districts who pool resources, funding to be able to do some projects together. So because we are not associated with any state or federal kind of organization, we can kind of be on the leading edge of some changes because we don't have to wait for money to be appropriated. We don't have to wait for kind of decision making to come down. When our districts see a need, we jump in and try to fill it. And one of those needs that we kept seeing among our members was to be able to get professional development to teachers and administrators in different ways than we had before. So it was not possible always to release teachers from the classroom to attend conferences or to attend professional development. The one-shot sit and get kind of professional development was not getting any traction and going deeper into the system. Online courses were a bit too much, paced too tightly, and were maybe a bit lengthy for what the needs were. And also in Iowa, we have a very large system of instructional coaches in districts. And so those instructional coaches, as they observed teachers and principals as they observed teachers, when they found a need that the teachers had, that, for example, something in their instructional repertoire that wasn't working or that needed to be pumped up a little bit, they needed to have some quick kinds of resources and organized tasks to help teachers see how to change their practice. And then have those kind of pre-organized materials and resources and tasks ready to assign to those teachers. So for example, a principal of need of improvement might have something, and we'll talk more about implementation in a bit. So MISIC, because of Robert, thank you, Robert, we saw an article that Robert had written probably 4 years ago on micro credentials, which got us interested in using them in this way. And so since that time, we have developed about 75 micro credentials and developed a platform to use them on.
That's awesome.
So that's kind of our whole story there.
Yeah, and you said something that's very interesting to me about face-to-face. I've been to some face-to-face that were valuable, and I got something out of it. But many times, and I hear teachers always saying this, yay, I got a certificate for sitting for 6 hours and something I'll never use. So I'm glad to hear that this might change that. So Jennifer, talk about your role with KVEC and what you're doing with us here.
Okay. First, thank you for having me. I am the Personalized Professional Learning Lead for the Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative, which folks may know is an educational service agency serving 23 school districts in southeastern Kentucky. So we are serving students and teachers that are in a very rural and remote area, and a lot of high need schools. We have some of the poorest school districts in the nation are located right in our region. And to kind of add insult to injury, that we already are working at a disadvantage with terms of funding. We are in our third biennium of our state legislature not providing any dollars for professional development, but school districts still have that unfunded mandate of being able to provide professional learning experiences for teachers. And so rather than just being in a reactive mode, KVEC several years ago really tried to be proactive in trying to meet the needs of our teachers and our administrators in terms of professional learning. So through an opportunity that was provided to us from the Gates Foundation, we started very early in investigating micro credentials as a form of clinical professional learning. We know that educators are professionals and their work is more of an art than a science. And they need opportunities to practice their craft and reflect on that and examine the impact that what they're doing is having on their own professional practice, as well as advancing outcomes for students. So that's kind of how we started venturing into the world of micro credentials. And we have been able to really tap in, because we have such a close working relationship with our districts, really tap into what their needs are and be able to work with them to develop micro credentials that meet their needs. And we have even started, and we'll talk about this more too, providing a little bit of support and professional learning to our educators in how to develop micro credentials so that they become developers and assessors of them as well. So, we have been I think we've been very proactive in using micro credentials not as the next best thing to face-to-face professional learning, but truly it is one of the best ways. There are other ways that educators learn. Educators can learn in a face-to-face setting, but micro credentials provide an avenue for those types of professional learning that requires skill and competency, and teachers to be able to practice something and reflect on that learning. So this has been really fun. And I think, we'll talk a little bit about the reactions that we've had from some of our educators, but it's been great. And I'm looking forward to this conversation today.
Well, you said a couple of things there we need to highlight. Like it's third biennium without professional development funds. But professional development, professional learning needs to continue. So the funds have to come from somewhere. And even in some cases, it's great if those funds don't have to be used for transportation costs, bringing in extra speakers, extra materials, hotel rooms, etc. Especially, and so you can attest to this too, when you live in remote areas, you have to travel quite a distance to get places. You got to be taken out of the classroom to get places. So micro credential can help fit that bill very well. So we're going to jump right in because you both started skirting around this. So I think it's very important as we have this conversation within your organizations. Micro credentials has a lot of meetings depending on the population or the groups with whom you may be speaking. So let's think about your organization, how you define micro credentials, and how you're getting your districts involved in, as you said, in that collaboration of using and developing. So Jennifer, we'll start with you, okay, on this one. So how does KVEC define micro credentials, and how are the districts starting to use those?
I think it's funny that you bring that up, because just today I saw an advertisement for an agency that was offering micro credentials to teachers, and they would earn their micro credential through watching a video. And so No.
We need clear
Sorry.
definitions, that's for sure. We need clear definitions.
Sorry. I thought I would just go ahead and shake it up from the
Obviously,
beginning.
this is a hot spot, you know.
No.
And
I just had a heart attack. Just so you know, if I
I
suddenly
know.
disappear from the screen, I've fallen down.
I know. So while Sue works on reviving herself, I will go on to say that I had much the same reaction, because we truly do believe that micro-credentials are rigorous and high quality professional learning. And we have adopted the design principles and the assessment principles that were created by a consortium group that came together, including Digital Promise and Learning Forward. And we believe that micro-credentials are clinical professional learning. So just as we would ask our medical professionals to be on the floor of a doctor's office or a hospital and be learning in the context of their work, that is also what we're asking teachers to do. And I'm going to say educators, because we have a lot of administrators who also earn micro-credentials to improve their own professional practice as well. So while there are a lot of things that are being called micro-credentials and a lot of things that people are doing to earn badges, I think we have to be really clear that a micro-credential has certain components, that it must require some learning on the part of the educator, that they are doing some self-directed learning and research around a particular skill or competency that they have a need in. And then they are applying that in the context of which they work, so that it truly is evidence-based, not just research-based, but evidence-based. And then that they're able to reflect on that learning and to determine, how has it impacted my practice? How has it impacted student outcomes? So there has to be some critical pieces. And there are lots of ways that educators can learn. I'm not saying that they can't learn through video, but then they have to take that and put it into practice. Because if we're not actually reflecting on what is happening in the classroom and reflecting on what is happening in terms of student learning, then we are still looking at some one-shot professional development deals, and we're past that.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Jennifer, about the learning, because often when I have conversations with folks around my credentials, and it's back to this definition, they'll say, but there's no real learning happening. And to which I'll say, but the learning is embedded within the clinical experiences as you look at your research, as you design your plans, as you're gathering data, as you're looking at the artifacts and evidence. It's all encompassed in this digital format. So that
I think that anybody that would say that there's not learning involved, they haven't looked deep enough into what a micro-credential is. And I could, as an educator, let's say that I was really good at formative assessment. Let's say that I had mastered it. I had gone through lots of workshops with Rick Stiggins and Jan Chapuis, and I had done lots of state level things, and I was really good at it. Well, I could go earn a micro-credential around formative assessment that didn't require a heavy lift for me in terms of professional learning, because I already had acquired that. But I could demonstrate that learning and earn the badge. But the learning still happened. It happened somewhere, and it happened somehow. And I still have to demonstrate that ability. So the learning did happen. But we're really encouraging micro-credentials to be part of a professional learning system in which educators aren't just cherry picking micro-credentials that they already have a demonstrated competency for, but they are really using that as part of their own professional growth plan to continue to grow and hone their professional practice.
And as a former administrator, I can see this as a great way to sit with a teacher or others. Let's look at what we can do to improve instruction and help students. Now, Sue, hearing what Jennifer had said, how do you guys view micro-credential with your organization? Similar, different, or are there similarities, some contrasts?
Right. I agree with everything Jennifer said. That it is a little bit of a mix. I mean, we haven't had a history of honoring what teachers know and what they can do. And I think that if we look at adult learning theory, we know that that's one of the key components, is that People feel honored for their experience and their knowledge. So in one way, you know, I kind of wish, I remember one time at a conference at one of the summits, someone said the research had shown that teachers primarily at the onset were more interested in using micro-credentials as proof of a skill rather than learning new skills. And at the time I was like kind of appalled by that. It's like, oh no, we need to have new skills. And then it kind of, if we go back to adult learning theory, we know that that's the first step, is that I can use these as kind of that proof and evidence of my skill. And we have never given teachers the opportunity to prove the skills they have. So I'm not necessarily, you know, so I hope that, and we tell people, don't just use them for things that you are terrible at. It's kind of like a special ed student at one point in time wrote that every day he was asked to do the same tasks over and over that he wasn't good at, that he was never allowed to do tasks that he was good at. So, you know, it's kind of like that with teachers. I think initially, I think it's a real buy-in for teachers, because let's face it, micro-credentials take a lot more work than sitting at a conference or sitting at an in-service doing your lesson plans while you kind of attend to the speaker, right? Yeah. And so, and our teachers will say, this took a lot more time than you told us it was going to take, but I don't regret a minute of it, because I learned a lot. Yeah. And so that's kind of, to me, a key thing. First of all, when a micro-credential has to have a task that's worth doing and that's real, and that teachers feel like it is really something they're going to be able to use in the classroom. Not a paper that they write, like we oftentimes see in an online course, not a fake kind of, you know, outline of something, but real work, real classroom-based work. And so what our teachers are telling us, and what we use is, you know, we kind of see a medium ground. Right now, we know there's a need for more people to get better at remote teaching and learning. Regardless of what happens with COVID and how soon it goes away, we know that remote teaching and learning is a reality for the long haul. Yeah. So let's get better at it. So when a couple of our districts this spring said, well, we have professional development time that we're not going to be able to get together to use. We need to find another way for teachers to gain these skills. They turned to micro-credentials, and they said, okay, you can pick, there are 6 micro-credentials here on remote teaching and learning. You can pick 3 that you think has the most value for you as a teacher. But you must complete the 3, and you must complete them to the point of passing them, of getting the badge, of earning the badge. So it was a nice combination between some direction for the whole district, so we have people going the same direction, but also I get to pick which ones, and then within those topics of what I picked, I get to choose the resources, the learning pieces I need in order to prepare myself. So there's a lot of personalization within the micro-credential as well. So again, our thing was, I think what Jennifer said about maybe a principal seeing a teacher that says, you know, here's an area, but maybe you could, you know, in our informal conversations or formal conversations, here's a skill that you would benefit from. But I think the biggest battle with getting people to see this is that it does take more time and more effort to complete a micro-credential than the other professional development methods that we have out there. And that's where, you know, we're going to fight a little bit of a battle to have people say, it's worth that extra time and effort for the learning and the results that I get.
You know, based on the comments from both of you, and this would be an entirely different podcast, and you think about meaningful professional learning, impactful to my classroom, impactful to my students, I get to choose what I'm doing. You're also addressing teacher retention issues. You know, bringing value to what they, so again, that's a whole other podcast, but I just wanted to throw that in there as we get started. Okay. So I'm an administrator, superintendent, principal, or teacher, lead teacher in a school, working with other teachers. And I see a desperate need to change the professional learning system for the culture of my school. How do I get involved in micro-credentials as part of that learning system? How did that work for you? Sue, I'll let you start on this one.
Okay. Well, I'll kind of go back to that, our real experience this spring with remote teaching and learning. Sometimes it's the circumstances, and that's what kind of led people into it. It was kind of actually maybe one good benefit of the COVID crisis is that we've had teachers say, yeah, it was a lot more work, but it was worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that they would have invested that kind of time or chosen that pathway had they been able to just listen to a day presentation from somebody that the district brought in on remote teaching and learning.
Yeah.
And then we also allowed teachers, here was another key point. We encourage teachers to work in groups. Mm-hmm. So that, whether it was a PLC or just a group of teachers who liked each other and wanted to work together at grade level, we encourage them to have conversations around the resources they were using and reading, sharing their work with each other, and kind of giving some evaluation and some input on each other's work. So the learning really became very deeply seated that way, rather than I just did it all on my own.
So your PLC, your professional learning communities, your professional learning networks, whatever you call it in that particular school or district, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So, Jennifer, how did you all start designing systems?
Well, I agree with everything that Sue has said too, that, while a micro credential is very personalized and I have an entry point into it that fits my own professional learning needs, that doesn't mean I have to do it in isolation. I can really work with my grade level teams or content level teams or another educator who is working on the same micro credential, or just working with another educator to bounce some ideas off of. But some models that we have also seen that have really gotten some lift in our region is where schools sit down together and as a shared leadership team really look at their data, and not accountability data, which I always call autopsy data, because it's too late to pray when the devil comes. We've already taught that content and we've moved on. But let's look at the data that we have in front of us right now, and let's look at perception data. Let's look at what people are telling us about where we are, and identifying a problem of practice that we can work together as a school to solve. And so not just the teachers working on a micro credential to address that problem, but the administrator working on one as well. And really looking at how professional learning can push on that problem of practice, and we can see change in our practice and also change in our outcomes based on that. So we have a lot of schools that have adopted that model, and some of them identify a common micro credential that they're all going to work on, or they identify that problem of practice, and then each person looks a little deeper and develops their own theory of action about, so if student engagement in remote learning is our problem of practice, then what is my own professional learning needs related to that? And how can I improve my professional practice to help our school advance that problem of practice? And so we've seen lots of different models of that working. And to me, I just think that's a model that folks really should look at, about how we can all get engaged in working toward a solution that's going to move our students forward. It's going to move our school forward. It's going to move us as educators forward. And it really enhances that shared leadership approach, so that we're all working in the same direction. So all the oars are going in the same direction.
And that's really important, because oftentimes you'll hear teachers they're in from schools and they're having to do all this work, but it's being dictated to them. And so when you have your administrators, I call it walking the talk, but being part of that team, no one sees this as an isolated, siloed event. It's a whole group event. So I think that's important. But both of you mentioned something about your teachers. So I'm very interested to hear, you talk about the systems being changed, embedding this on their need, but what are they saying? I know it was a lot more work, but overall in general, are they constant positives? Are they like, this has just been so beneficial to me? What are your teachers and administrators saying who are involved in micro credentials? Sue, go ahead.
Okay. Right. We had this spring, a couple of our small districts, and they're districts of about 1,000 students. So they're not, by any means large districts, were the ones that mandated that teachers do complete at least 3 micro credentials in the area of remote teaching and learning, and they could choose those. So we had about 900 micro credentials completed by teachers. Some passed on the first go round, some did not. And we had a constant cycle of feedback with them back and forth. But the feedback that we have gotten from the majority of teachers that we've heard from has been, while these were difficult, they felt that they were very beneficial, that within the task that they were asked to do to demonstrate that skill, that they were able to create real work that they could use in the classroom, real products that they could use in the classroom, and develop skills that they'll use in the classroom. So while they said, this is a lot of work, this is more work than other PD kinds of models, they saw value in that. Now, I'm sure we had some we didn't hear from that would have felt differently than that. But I think that it's going to be that constant battle between how do we take the easy road, which is maybe a sit and get. And by the way, I'm not against sit and gets.
Yeah.
I think that oftentimes, for example, when I was doing literacy work with districts, my role was to come in and get people excited about thinking about literacy in their content areas. And then from there, they could do more personalized things. So I think sit and gets can oftentimes give us the foundation, the background, maybe the motivation to go into a micro credential. I want to learn more now, and I want to be able to demonstrate this, and I think this will be good for my kids. So I think there's, teachers have been overall pretty positive about micro credentials, especially when they have some choice.
Yeah, you have some audio you'd like to share.
Sure.
Of your teachers. This would be a good place to include.
Okay.
That.
Okay. We did this. We asked teachers to come up with. Hopefully, you're seeing this now. Okay. Let me rewind it, and here we go.
I'd just like to say that the quality of the credentials are nothing but positive. They really push people's thinking. And so the creators of those, I'd like to commend them. It's a great way to have PD at your fingertips. You can do PD in your pajamas at home if you want to. So it's great to have it accessible 24/7.
I felt like teachers bought into it a lot more because they could, not only did they get to choose what they wanted to focus on, but they also had that ability to say, I'm actually going to be using this with my students in my classroom.
With MISIC and with the Skillsforce platform, people have some opportunity for differentiation. So ensuring that they're getting what it is that they need.
They don't have to wait for me to direct them to do that. They could, just look in there, and those resources are there from the micro credentials that they did if they wanted to go back and look at something else or moving forward.
Me and the other people that I work with, whenever we got our feedback back from an email or anything, we'd call each other. Hey, did you get your feedback? What do we have to do next? And it was really exciting to get it, and just to know that we were getting feedback from an authentic person, not just from a computer, knowing that they actually went through our work. It doesn't matter what format of lesson plans we had. They were looking through it. We got timely feedback, and we were able to see, well, what can we do differently? So, weirdly enough, it was pretty exhilarating to get that back.
Moving forward, if we were planning for future PDs, like knowing that this is in our pocket, that we don't have to do it all by ourselves.
So I commend MISIC for creating micro credentials in the first place, and really appreciate Skillsforce partnering with MISIC. It's going to be a great partnership.
So while the video wasn't really professional quality, we just wanted to gather a few comments from some of our folks. And I think that whole point about, as a former curriculum director, being able to go to an individual teacher or a small group of teachers and saying, here's a skill, here's a piece that will be very helpful to you in your classroom, and everything's organized. All the resources are there. All of the reflection questions are there. And by the way, those reflection questions alone around a micro-credential topic is really critical for people to start to learn. And Jennifer mentioned that earlier. John Dewey said, we learn by doing, but only if we reflect on what we've done.
Right.
And those reflection questions form great questions for conversations between instructional coaches and teachers, but among PLC members, between principals and teachers. So I think even sometimes not using a whole micro-credential in its entirety and even taking it to the completion of the task, there's a lot of benefit to having those resources in that way.
I think so too. Now, Jennifer, you've worked with several teachers and principals as well. What are your folks saying?
Well, I think one of the things that I need to say is that I studied micro credentials, the impact of micro credentials on educator professional practice, student outcomes, and educator perception of their professional learning as part of my dissertation. And so I was able to actually have some in-depth conversations with teachers in our region who were engaged in micro credentialing. And something that really came out is, first of all, they really, after they were engaged in micro-credentialing, and then we took the time to sit down and really look at learning forward standards on professional learning, which Kentucky has adopted as our own state standards for professional learning. Teachers were really able to see how tightly aligned the micro-credentials were to what we know professional learning should be. Let's move from that old idea of professional development to professional learning, and the fact that we are basing it on data, that we do involve learning communities, that we do you try to build leadership in our educators to take responsibility for their own professional learning and to continue on that trajectory. So the teachers were really excited to see that tight alignment. And but what they really talked about a lot was going back to what one of the teachers in the video that Sue shared kind of alluded to was, when they would get that feedback, at first, if they weren't successful, they were a little taken back. Like, how dare you say that my work did not meet standards? I'm a teacher. They were a little just offended. And then after they could deal with the rejection or whatever you want to call it at first, and then they could read the feedback, they saw, okay, I didn't do that. And now I'm going to do it, and I'm going to submit it again. And then I'm going to have this opportunity to be successful. And there was one who said, I really pushed back on the feedback that I got and said, your feedback's not right. And, they stuck to their guns and said the feedback, was correct. Let's look at this a little bit deeper. Here's where you did not meet the objectives. And it was like, you're not right. I'm right. And he kept pushing on it until he finally just said, okay, I'm going to look at this objectively, and I'm going to take it where the feedback is taking me, and really saw the impact that it had on his instruction. So, this is a different model, and it is rigorous. And it is asking people to kind of open themselves up and get feedback from a person, not from a computer, not from something that's automatically generated and it's aligned to a rubric. So, that was different for teachers. But, overall, what we really saw was that the teachers, they really positively regarded their experience. They really felt like it was something that mattered and made a difference, that it was a lot more work than being able to hold a chair down for 6 hours. And our teachers and our administrators, they really struggle with how do you credential learning time, because we're still on an hours basis in our state that teachers have to have 4 days of professional learning. So how do I make a micro credential count for days? How many days should a micro credential count for? So really trying to help educate, and we can't tell you that, that's something that has to be made at a decision that has to be made at a local level, but really helping everyone to see that, and teachers seeing that a micro credential is true learning, and it is a true demonstration of learning. And so the feedback that we got through, and we continue to get, one of the very first pieces of data that I ever heard about micro credentials was from the Friday Institute, and the fact that 97% of educators who successfully earned a micro credential went on to earn another one. And that has just stuck with me forever, because I'm really thinking about, so when people have a positive learning experience, it makes them like learning. And we, as teachers, we know that. And so, our teachers have even taken this a step further, and they're looking at, so I enjoyed a competency-based learning experience, and I enjoyed earning a badge. So let me create those kinds of learning experiences for my kids. And so it's really translating into competency-based learning in a classroom, because teachers kind of see the value of the model, and they want to provide that opportunity for their kids too.
And I think that's so important that you said that, because if the professional learning you're getting doesn't have positive impact on your clients, I'll call our students clients, that is the goal of every educator, improving the learning environment and making sure their students are successful. So think about what you've said, that micro credentials, it's a digital platform-based learning. However, it's clinical, it's just in time, it's based on educators' need, there's learning involved, it's more rigorous than some traditional professional learning. So knowing all that, and this is going to change my system of professional learning. If I come to Sue and Jennifer and I say, I need to know where to begin because this is new for us, what will you tell me? Sue, what would you tell me?
Yeah, a couple of things. I'm a real believer in, and have been a kind of a student of change theory over the years. And I think there's only, it kind of comes down to this. My personal belief is there's only 2 reasons people change. One is they're so upset or so angst over the way things currently are that they're willing to put in the time, effort, and investment to be able to change it. Or they see something, excuse me, they see something so much better, the grass that's green behind you there, Robert, that they're willing to jump the fence and do the extra work to make the change. I also believe in making change that we have to listen to the idea that everybody is tuned into station WIIFM.
Mm-hmm.
What's in it for me?
Yeah.
And so I think that, we have to understand the people that we're asking to change, and pay attention to change theory about how do we get people motivated to want this change, to want to change their practice. The what's in it for me. How will my life as a teacher, and it's not that I'm a selfish person, so I have to think about what's in it for me, but that's just true in anything. Nobody does anything in life without first kind of thinking a little bit about that first little piece is, how is this going to impact my life? How is this going to impact my world? And how is this going to change things for me? So when we can help them see that, we take a skill and we help you become more comfortable with that skill, which then makes your kids more comfortable and makes teaching more enjoyable. That's the whole piece of the what's in it for me there. And we also have a saying at MISIG, it's not about professional development, because professional development is something we do to people. Mm-hmm. And we, that we attend, et cetera. We are trying to change the language from professional development to developing as professionals. And that goes along with Daniel Pink's work on motivation, on adult learning theory, on change theory, all of those things. And if we tell our folks, if you aren't paying attention up front to those things, if you don't know what motivates people to learn, if you don't understand what it takes for someone to change their practice, and if you don't understand adult learning theory, you're probably not going to be successful with kind of cramming micro-credentials down the throats of teachers. But instead, this is a learning tool, and help them experience it and get comfortable with it up front, so that it becomes that kind of enjoyable experience as well as a deep learning experience. So we tell, we do a lot of design with having teachers, for example, when we offer a conference, let's say we've done conferences on social emotional learning, and on some other topics. So if we do a conference on social emotional learning and you go to the conference, if you want to get a licensure renewal credit for that conference, you can't just go to the conference and then write a reflection paper. You have to go to the conference and then do that, take some skill from that conference and put it into play via micro-credential. So we tie micro-credentials to other experiences for districts. We have book studies that we have created for districts. We have several popular books that we've created, kind of a set process for a book study. And you can get a licensure renewal credit from the book study, but then you can get another one by completing a micro-credential that shows your learning in action. So we're constantly trying to put those two pieces together and show people that it's not about just doing micro-credentials as PD, and it's not about just doing a book study or going to a conference. But I think that's going to be the most difficult issue for us, is to find ways to help people start to look at PD as that system. So we truly are getting to the learning needs of our teachers and empowering them to become learners again, instead of just sit and get it, or just, behave yourself for 6 hours. I love your comment, Jennifer, about holding down the chair for 6 hours as being the real skill. So I think that's going to be a challenge for all of us. And I think creating some models for districts, and that's one thing we're working on now, is creating some models for here's how it could work. One of our team members put together a model for principals to use in their profession, in teacher meetings, to kind of start to ease into micro-credentials, and how can you get people started down the road, and how can you start to use them, and then have them play out in your PLCs or in other kinds of modes. So I think we need to have very strong models of what it looks like to be able to really change to developing as professionals.
I like what you said there, because everything you describe is, you're not looking at micro-credentials as the system. Micro-credentials are a component within the larger system. And you were very clear, and you did that very well, how that embeds into different components. So thank you for that. And Jennifer, last comments from you about what would your advice would be working with districts just when you get started out with this?
Could I just say ditto to everything that Sue said? Absolutely. And I know that this podcast is about micro-credentials, but I kind of want to use an analogy that we're kind of seeing with kids right now. And after a day of online learning, and you ask kids, so, what did you learn today? And they say, I did a screencastify, or I did a Padlet, or I did. So I always say, I have this terminology about the tail wagging the dog. And a lot of times in this remote environment, the technology is overshadowing the learning. Mm-hmm. And we don't want the micro-credential to overshadow the learning, because there are other forms of professional learning that are just as powerful. And so when we have teachers working in networks, and we have teachers working together in PLCs, and we have teachers doing observations in each other's classrooms, or videoing themselves and then sitting down and, observing that, or doing a lesson study, there are so many powerful forms of professional learning, and micro-credentials are one of them. And if it fits the need, if it gives teachers an opportunity to enhance their professional practice and to meet at that sweet spot where I'm improving my professional practice and my student outcomes are advancing, then I have found a way to learn and engage that is powerful and helpful and beneficial and worthwhile. And so really helping educators and their administrators who are making a lot of these decisions to see professional learning as a system, and that there's so many ways that educators can be learning, and they're not in silos, or it's not being done to them, that they are part of that decision making and part of that learning process. Then I think we're going to see those shifts that a lot of people are experiencing right now, because they are creating those environments for that to happen.
You know, and as always, as we finish up, I just want to say that whenever I speak with you, Jennifer, or with you, Sue, and listen to your passion about how micro-credentialing, or any kind of micro-credentialing, or any type of competency-based learning is changing the face of teacher and educator learning, changing the culture of a classroom and school. And I can only think that the students in there are reaping great benefits from all this work. And that's what we're all about. So I want to thank you guys for joining us today on the Digitalachia podcast. And I look forward to continued conversations and work with both of you. And on behalf of the Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative, thank you for your time, and hope you'll join with us next time.